Hi, good evening. Welcome to Native Plants for Colorado Pollinators with the BeeChicas. I am Kathy Lane, Programs, Events, and Outreach Coordinator with the Boulder Public Library. The BeeChicas are on screen with me, and Shannon Kincaid is behind the scenes engineering the live stream. First, before we begin, I'll briefly cover some housekeeping. This event is being recorded and will be available on Boulder Public Library's YouTube channel and Seed to Table and BeeChicas playlists after today. All of our online events are an extension of library services. Therefore, library conduct policies apply in our online space. I invite you to visit the library's website at boulderlibrary.org for our full virtual events calendar, including Seed to Table events focusing on sustainable living with gardening, cooking, and BeeChica workshops. I'd like to thank the Boulder Library Foundation for its generous sponsorship of this and so many of our library events. During this event, you can post your questions in the chat by logging into your Google, YouTube, or Facebook accounts. The BeeChicas will answer questions after their 30-minute presentation on native plants for Colorado pollinators. The BeeChicas have been working with the City of Boulder and the library since 2015 for Seed to Table workshops. You might see them from the Boulder Creek Path taking care of the library beehives on the main library roof in their colorful beekeeper suits. The BeeChicas are also volunteer coordinators for Pollinator Appreciation Month and the Boulder Bee Festival. Visit BeeChicas.com for resources, recipes, and videos. So I would like to introduce Tracy Bellhumer, Cynthia Scott, Teresa Beck, and Deborah Foy. They are scientists, artists, gardeners, beekeepers, and pollinator advocates. So BeeChicas, thank you for adapting what would be an in-person workshop in an online experience. And Cynthia will start us off talking about plants and pollinators.
Thanks, Kathy. So happy to be here. And welcome to our third part of our spring gardening series to talk about native plants for Colorado gardens. So first of all, why should you even consider putting natives in your garden? Well, for one thing, it's right. If you live in Colorado, the backdrop of the Rocky Mountains, Colorado native plants just have the right sense of place. Also, they're great host plants for insects and food and shelter and bees and all of the native creatures that we love so much. So if you want to do this, how can you start the process? So on the picture on the left, it's a planting that includes some plains natives, including the Joe Pyeweed at the top, and brown-eyed Susans, and in the middle, this blue swath is our native aster. That's a great plant, and these are planted closely, tightly together for habitat for all the critters that live there. And it's planted from the ground, which you can't even see the pussy toes on the ground level, all the way up to the sky. And you won't get as many weeds if you plant densely like this. And of course, leave your leaves throughout the winter for habitat. Don't bug your bugs. And of course, no pesticides would be great. And with native plants, you don't need the pesticides and the fertilizers that you sometimes need for other non-native plants. And one big thing to note is the root systems of native plants are just incredible. On the far left of this, you can see turf grass, and the roots are about 3 inches long. And if you travel your eyes all the way to the right-hand side, you can see a native turf grass, buffalo grass, and the roots go down 8 feet into the soil. And there's some plants that we're going to talk about today, prairie clover, and echinacea and goldenrod, that systems of roots are amazing, and they hold water, they prevent erosion, they're just great things. And I'm not going to be talking much about landscape grasses, but little blue stem and switchgrass are wonderful plants to use in your gardens, as well as all of the plants I'm going to get into. And these are just some of the butterflies and other beneficials that you can host if you have more natives. So let's dive right into some plant profiles. We're going to talk about the spring plants first and going into the fall plants. So the beautiful pasque flowers, which look like crocus, all the way to frost with the goldenrods on the far right. So if you were at any of our other ones, I have talked about Oregon grape before, the Mahonia repens, which is a Colorado native, wonderful evergreen presence, and great nectar plant, and beautiful fall and winter color. And this is one of my favorites, the Spring Beauty, or Claytonia. It loves to be under ponderosa pine trees, and it has a specialist bee that only goes to this plant, and it's the mining bee in Colorado, and I have this sprouting up in my yard, and it's one of those roots that goes down forever. It's unbelievable. It's actually a corm. Another favorite is prairie smoke, and it's called prairie smoke because of these fall seed pods that come up. They look like a rock star hair or something, and it's a great ground cover, and it is actually buzz pollinated. So the bumblebee will come and attach itself to the flower and buzz at the perfect frequency for pollen to come shooting out of the tip of this flower. It gets all over the bumblebee, and then she'll brush it all into her corbicula and make a little pollen pocket, but a lot of it will stay on her back. So when she goes to the next plant, it gets rubbed off on it. This is also an award-winning plant from the Garden Club of America. The Freeman Medal awards a special native plant every year, and a couple of years ago this one won. Of course, Rocky Mountain Columbine, an absolute favorite. Easy to grow. It likes more moist, which is good for regular garden beds, which are a little more moist than native plants usually like. This also, I'll just mention, if you have other columbines in your yard, including the other native Aquilegia chrysantha that's bright yellow, it will hybridize with that. And so your bright blue one, if it turns yellow, it didn't die and a new plant appeared. It just hybridized and the flowers have switched. Okay, sulfur flower is a great mat forming spreading plant. It's also known as wild buckwheat, and it is a host plant for the white-lined sphinx moth. And this is wonderful because it turns reddish in the fall and has beautiful seed pods that stay there for garden interest.
Cynthia, what was the name of that one? The slide we're looking at is Spring Beauty. Clay.
Oh, it hasn't been going forward. Can you see the GM?
No, it's going forward for me. I'm seeing every photo.
Yes, me too.
Okay,
You're good, Sin.
It's not.
Okay.
It's fine then.
Thanks, Tracy. I hope that it comes back for you.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, this is kind of a new one for me. I just found it at the Denver Botanic Garden sale, and I've seen it all over in the wild. And we'll talk about later where you can find these plants. Native plants aren't always easy to source, so we're going to suggest that you always ask for them whenever you're at any nursery. But this one, there are some more invasive parsleys, and the way you can tell that if it's the real one is the basal leaves, or the leaves close to the ground are heart-shaped like this. So, and it's a host plant for the black swallowtail. It also has bee specialists like Hylaeus, our favorite little yellow-faced bees, and Andrena and Nomia, which is a cool parasitic bee. And this is our beloved aspen daisy that you'll see all over in the mountains. This is easy to grow in the yard, and it's very adaptable as well. Butterflies love it. Look at that beautiful little landing pad for butterfly. And all kinds of bees, including lots of leafcutter bees, are always on this in my yard. Rocky Mountain penstemon. So I'm going to just talk about all penstemons in general. Penstemon strictus is a great plant, and it's very readily available. But there are also other penstemons that are available in the trade that are natives, like this, Penstemon etonii, or which is the bright red one, and then Penstemon pseudospectabilis is the bright pink one. And they look fabulous together, I think, especially after a trip to India. But Penstemons are kind of a short-lived perennial. So if you deadhead these regularly as they're blooming, you might get a second flush of bloom, and also the plant will live longer. But leave a stalk or two, since they are short-lived, so that you can get a few seeds coming up in your own garden. And blanket flower, this is a beautiful one that we love. There's so many blanket flowers in the trade that I wanted to talk a little bit about knowing the Latin name or the botanical name. Gaillardia aristata is a pretty easy one to say and remember. And the reason you want this specific native one to Colorado is that it has a specific Gaillardia moth that is pictured up in the right. And this moth will put its head down over the petal and leave its body over the red part with its wings down. And it's nearly invisible on the Gaillardia plant. And it's, so if you do find this and grow this, this is a beautiful, very easy, adaptable plant as well. And you might be able to spot the Gaillardia moth. Purple prairie clover. This is a wonderful, also very easy to grow filler plant for your gardens. It can be used instead of non-natives like Veronica spicata, and it's an absolute bee magnet and insectary plant, and it has really great nitrogen fixing roots because it is a clover, so it's good health for the plants around it. And this is just some scenes of how you can have a little bit of a prairie in your garden. The wine cup is a stunning, beautiful plant on the left. That's a matte ground cover. But if you add Artemisia to your meadow, you have an instant Colorado look, I think, if you're going for the wildflower meadow. And Artemisia, this is Artemisia frigida, and there's many other native Artemisias, which are great for insects, and they just give that beautiful blue Colorado look. Of course, butterfly plants, Asclepias are wonderful. They're not just good for monarchs, they're good for so many other butterflies and bees. And there's the three species I have listed here are easily available in the trade, but there are others also if you go to specialty like rock garden plant sales or native plant sales. And the beloved echinacea, there's varieties that are also, besides purpurea, that are also native here. I love the pallida, which is really from a little bit further eastern plain. It's beautiful and tall with weeping petals, but this is a stunner in the garden and easy if you're a first-time native grower. And of course, back to the goldenrods, no garden is complete without these in the fall. Amazing source of nectar and beautiful fireworks in the garden in the fall. And our beloved tansy aster also, it's used to be called, it's also called smooth aster because it has smooth leaves. And it is just a wonderful season extender also, like the solidago. There's specialist bees that go to this. It reseeds and fills in, like in that first slide I showed you, in beautiful unexpected places. And it gets up to 3 feet tall. If you want it to bloom even later or you want it to be shorter, you can whack it off in the middle and it'll be much bushier and shorter when it blooms, but it still will bloom just prolifically, and it's wonderful. And don't forget to consider trees and shrubs. I always say that a fruit tree like serviceberry, this top one, it's a close-up of it, is like an entire meadow. There's so many flowers on it, and this, so you can plant one tree and have so much nectar and habitat if you choose a native tree. Golden currant, this is blooming right now all across town, and if you walk by this is Rubus odoratum, and if you walk past it, you will get blown away by the smell of cloves. It's just amazing. And Rabbit brush is one of our latest nectar sources for our bees, and it likes it hot and dry. If you have a hot and dry spot, then definitely put these in. And of course, our beautiful Rosa woodsii. There's also Rosa glauca and other native roses that just shimmer for a short time in your garden. Okay, and now we're going to show a video of just some eye candy. So this is purple prairie clover in my garden, being visited by just seems like thousands of bees. There's honeybees and everything on there. Also bumblebees, like this bumblebee, which is on delphinium up in the mountains. This is another, it's also called larkspur, and there's a couple of different varieties, but if you can get these seeds, it's great. And I just had to show you this. These columbines are over 11,000, almost 12,000 feet in the San Juan Mountains in southern Colorado. Just stunning. You can have that in your own garden. Okay, so now I'm going to pass it over to Teresa. Oh, sorry, Deborah's next.
Oh, thank you. Beautiful pictures. We could get that without the hike up to 12,000 feet, right?
Yes.
So the great news is that native plants are gaining in popularity, and there are movements literally across the country to provide more native forage for our pollinators. We that live here in Boulder have wonderful nurseries that do a great job of providing native plant stock, but sometimes the supply can't always keep up with the demand. So as Cynthia said earlier, it's really important when you visit the nurseries to ask for native plants. Inquire about whether or not they grow them and express your interest in it, because if nurseries know there's an interest and there are customers, they will grow more for us. In the meantime, a great solution is to grow your own. Starting seeds inside can be relatively easy, and especially if you're already growing veggie starts or annual starts. And if you're planting larger areas, it's definitely much more economical to do your own. You can also get a head start on the winter months and utilize those cold, snowy months to start plants inside, and it's just fun. It's fun to do. This is a tray of native echinacea and purple prairie clover I started over the winter. I sourced my seeds from a local seed company here, BBB Seed, and they're a trusted, lovely supplier of native plant seeds, and they also ship if you need it. So it's good for those of you that don't live directly here. Next slide, I think. So once you've selected the seeds you want to grow, it's important, and you'll really want to make the effort to read the seed packet and figure out what that plant needs to grow. I have a small sort of wild hillside in my garden that I am working to transition to all natives, or mostly all natives. And it's definitely going to be a multi-year project, but I started by directly sowing seeds last fall. And then I sowed different varieties of seeds in February on top of the snow. And why on top of the snow in the middle of February? Because the neighbors were definitely wondering the same thing as they walked by. It's because some plants need cold stratification to germinate, which basically means they need a period of cold and then a period of warmth to trigger germination. So sowing them on the snow works beautifully because you have the snow as it melts, pulling those seeds down to the soil surface. And obviously here we'll get 1 or 2 more snowstorms. So with the cold, warm, Mother Nature sort of does the rest. But if you're starting seeds inside, you can mimic that by popping your planted trays of seeds into the fridge. It's usually 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the plant variety. So if you can scoot the wine and the leftovers aside and make a deal with your husband, you can have a good chunk of the fridge to pop your seed trays into. And once they've chilled long enough, you bring them out and put them under your grow lights and they germinate. So different plants will need different things. Not all plants need cold germination. Some of them need, or cold stratification. Some of them work better when they're pre-soaked. Some of them need warmth. And so that's the reason you really want to pay attention to those seed packets or check the websites, which have a ton of information on germinating them and starting them inside. Of course, if you're growing inside, you'll need a grow light. You can see my setup here, and I don't know if you can see, but outside the window, there's a ton of snow on the ground. So I was definitely growing these in the heart of the winter. I have a counter height metal table that I use for my honey harvesting. So I just repurposed that for a grow station. And it's you can do this in simple ways. You can have a grow light on top of a counter, or you can get a very elaborate indoor grow situation. But I set up something that was pretty simple, and it's got a relatively small footprint, but when I turn the trays perpendicular to the shelves, I can get like 10 trays on this 2-shelf table. And then when I'm done with the growing season, I can use it for my honey harvesting. So I sort of like the dual purpose part of that. Something to keep in mind is that perennials grow very differently than the annuals you are probably used to. There's a saying, first year sleep. And as Cynthia mentioned and showed you that incredible slide of the root systems, the first year that perennials are growing, they're putting most of their energy into developing their root systems. So you won't see a lot of top growth above the soil line. They'll stay relatively small. The second year, they're continuing to develop their roots, but you'll see more happening above the soil line. And then, of course, the third year, they are leaping into their full glory like the slides you saw earlier. I grew these alongside annuals and veggie starts this year, and it of course is a shocking difference between the annuals and the vegetables that are going to fruit and bloom this year, and all the trays of natives I started that were just much slower and are still pretty tiny but healthy. So move your plants outside if you've started them in the spring and harden them off. You could move them out to the garden at that point, but even native seeds, when they're in the establishment phase, take care and attention. So you'll want to put them in a spot and not just forget about them. They'll still need water as baby plants, and they'll still need care to grow. A lot of people choose just to leave them in the trays over the hot, dry months of the summer and avoid putting them out where they might just get fried by the 90 and 100-degree temps, and let them get a little bit bigger. Let them establish that deeper root system so they're able to care for themselves more, and plant them out in the fall, in the late fall, and let them overwinter in the garden naturally and then emerge in the spring. And then some people like to leave their plants in a seed bed for even up to 2 years until they plant them out. So they'll move their plant starts out to a seed bed and overwinter them, and then maybe relocate them the following spring. But there are lots of resources. We've included a bunch of websites for you. And Teresa actually established a seed bed, and she's going to chat with us about her experience with that.
So as Deborah mentioned, you can grow them inside, but you can also grow them outside. And Mother Nature kind of takes care of them as long as you give them a little bit of extra water in the first year. And so you can prepare a place for your native plants, but you're going to want to amend the soil. And before you amend the soil, you have to get rid of some weeds. So the best way, in my opinion, is to hand dig the weeds to prepare the bed. But if you can't, or if it's a large bed, you may want to, or there's something in the soil that may not be good, like certain type of insect egg or larva or some bacteria or fungi that isn't good in the place where you have a designated seed bed. You can use a method called solarization. And that's where you take clear plastic and you spread it out over the area, making sure it's well watered, and you seal it in with soil along the edges. And then the sun just does the work for you. It just heats up the plants underneath, the weeds underneath, and creates steam. And then in the afternoon kind of bakes them. So as long as it stays moist, this process can get the soil up to 180 degrees. And so it could really take care of 90% of the weed seeds in that area. Black plastic will work as well, but it doesn't bake it and get the temperatures as up, but it does kill weeds. And then there's also a great method in permaculture called lasagna layering or sheet mulching. And in this method, you could take a bed, say you're doing your grass or an area of weeds. You mow it down, you water it really well. You start layering it with like cardboard or permeable, something water can get through layer. And then you add to that leaves and grass and then manure. You always want to put like straw down and then manure on top. And you could keep making this lasagna layer in thin layers and top it with about 3 inches at least of an organic mulch, like some sort of wood mulch. And you can even plant in that, but you leave it there for a season. And then by the next year, there's just so much life underneath that seed bed, and it restores the soil, the microorganisms, and brings earthworms in. So it's really, look it up on the internet. It's a very cool method of getting rid of weeds. Okay, next slide. So in order to grow your own natives, you're going to need a kind of a special Western soil recipe, and that includes a 50% and topsoil and 50% squeegee. Squeegee is a type of aggregate that is smaller than pea gravel but larger than sand, and it makes the soil super porous. So you use 70% of that plus 20% compost, because you are going to want to feed this first year these plants with a little bit of compost. And get those microorganisms working in the soil, and 10% washed sand. And washed sand are kind of like little bowling balls. There's mason sand, which are flat and they lock together and they don't allow the water to go through. But washed sand will work with the squeegee to make the soil more porous. And then we put down.
Teresa, can I ask a quick question?
Yes,
if you've got a lot of clay, would you use the washed sand?
Yes, you would. Because you also are incorporating I know that sand and clay can turn into concrete, but I think that 10% of washed sand in that bed with 50% of your topsoil that has clay in it and 50% of the squeegee. I think that's what I've read and I've experienced in my own garden.
Perfect.
And so we also have some great choices to grow by seed, and we put that on as far as the native Colorado natives. I just want to make a little distinction. I might be redundant, but when we say natives, we're talking about our Western Colorado natives, because people can say natives and they might mean Missouri or they might mean the plains of the Midwest, but we're talking about Colorado native plants. So we've got bee balm, we have blue flax, this beautiful echinacea with the bumblebee on it, which is a Bombus huntii. And we have 10 of them on there, which you can go to our website at BeeChicas.com and read them and look for those native seeds. Next slide. And finally, look for natives in the wild. Look at this beautiful cow parsnip on the left. You're going to find that up in the mountains around streams. And when it gets water in your garden, it can be about 5 feet tall and 5 feet wide. I have several of these plants and they like to reseed. So you have to pay attention and maybe move them and give them to friends, or, just move them to a place where they like. And campanula on the right, that's another, that's a harebell campanula. That's a native. Campanulas reseed very easily. So that's a good one, a choice to seed into your seed bed. And then this middle is sand lily, and that's blooming right now up in the foothills. So take a walk in the foothills. Go see what's blooming and see what would look beautiful in your garden. Now we're going to listen to a short video of. So I wanted to show you my outdoor workshop, which is what I'm working on, is planting up potted plants that I dug out of my garden in different places that I didn't want them anymore. And I'm putting native plants into containers, like a chokecherry, and there's asters, the tall native asters, some solidago, which is goldenrod, and a little native bee house right here. And this is solidago or goldenrod, and it's the native kind that's about 5 or 6, 7 feet tall sometimes. Here's some monkshood, which is also native, that I'm going to dig up and put in a different spot. So this is my seed bed, and I have some established natives in the back, and in the front I sometimes put some vegetables if I need to put a place for a big zucchini, but I also mark areas and rake them over and plant native seeds and get them started in a bed like this, and then I will pot them up into smaller 2-inch containers, or put them directly in the spot that I want the native seed plants to grow. And this is a vegetable garden. You can also use something like raised beds for planting native seeds. These are all vegetables, but this is a basic idea of a seed starting bed, and then you can just raise your own native plants, and you don't have to pay big bucks, but just raise them from seed.
Thanks, Teresa. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to identify plants, because I am not a master gardener, as are the other 3 BeeChicas. And one time I thought I had purple loosestrife in my yard, in my garden, and realized that I needed some help, and had Cynthia help me identify it. But I discovered that you can identify your own plants and natives with a couple really useful apps that you can put on your phone. PlantNet and iNaturalist are 2 of the most popular ones that are free. These are citizen science projects. It's people uploading photos, and then also scientists commenting on them as well. But on the top left, you can see there's a photo of a thistle, and thistles are wonderful for pollinators and our honeybees. And I love any thistle in our yard, but I've discovered just recently that this is not a native thistle. This is Canada thistle, and even where it's native in England, it's considered a noxious weed. So you can use, so this app on the top left, you see a snapshot from my phone. I'm using PlantNet, and the top photo of the honeybee on the thistle is my photo. And then the app recognizes the photo and uploads or shows you a bunch of options that it might be. And then you can look up more information. So you might look up either the flowers. So there's a symbol on the app that has a flower on the top, and that'll show, like, if you're looking at a photo of a flower, you want to compare it to other flowers, and then you can identify it that way, or leaves, or trees. But you can also look up under Wikipedia. There's a link right on there for its status as a weed. So if you think you're propagating natives in your yard, or if you're not sure what you're propagating, it might be good to identify them. On the right here is a native thistle. Might be Cynthia's photo. It is Nod Your Head. Okay, and there are a number of native thistle species in Colorado. And so if you see any thistle, don't stomp on it because it might just be a native that's wonderful for our native ecosystem. So there's a note here, and this must be, Cynthia, do you want to speak to that?
To which note?
You added that there's 2 new species of thistle.
Oh, right. Jennifer Ackerfield, who's a scientist at the Denver Botanic Gardens, is a specialist in Cirsium, which is thistles. And she's identified 22 native thistles species in Colorado, and 2 of them are completely new to science, and she's working on their descriptions right now. So she's trying to protect these native, amazing pollinator plants.
That's awesome. Thanks, Cynthia. So on the next slide, I was trying to identify another plant, and it's a, can you show it, Cynthia?
I've switched it on mine. I think it might have a little lag.
Okay. Well, it's, I was able to at least find a number of similar flowers to the one that I was looking for, but I still couldn't narrow it down. I had to ask Cynthia, who took that photo and posted it on our Instagram, our BeeChicas Instagram. So it's still difficult to identify plants in your yard. And so did you want to speak to that, Cynthia?
Yeah, this is an orange sneezeweed, or Hymenopsis hoopsii. I think, there's so many of these flowers, but this is abundant. You can also find out if you know where you are when you're taking this picture. There's a lot of it's regional sometimes, and this is a very abundant plant in Southwest Colorado where I took this photo. So yeah, it's hard to identify plants. It's scientists spend their lives keying out plants, so it's not an easy process.
So then I was going to also speak to, thanks, Cynthia, seed collecting. So this is something that you might do in the fall when you're putting your garden to bed and you're sorry to see all your blooms go. But you can collect seeds for the following year. And I do this a lot in our own yard, especially around our beehives. So I live in the mountains on Sugarloaf, about 7,000 feet. And we have, I thought was a lot of horehound. It's in the mint family. I thought it was a native, and I've been propagating it for years. So every fall, I take the dried seeds and I spread them where it likes to grow. And I have a huge collection on the hillside. It's still a beneficial plant to our native bees, because I see native bumblebees on it. But if you're going to collect seeds, you might want to find out what they are. And you cannot collect from public lands. You need a permit. So watch for, in the fall, open space mountain parks in Boulder County allows you to collect seeds on a seed walk. You might look for events in the fall. And then the Boulder Library has a seed swap or exchange quite often. Not all natives. We're developing at the library a seed bank for your vegetable gardens, and hopefully get more natives in there with more demand for native seeds. And I believe at our Bee Boulder Family Festival in the fall, we've had before Dave Sutherland, who's now retired from Open Space Mountain Parks, giving away, native plant seeds that he's collected in his garden around Chautauqua. So,
and Tracy, you should only collect from your own garden or with permission from a friend's garden. Is that correct?
Right. So yeah, no public lands unless it's like a tour with you need a permit to collect seeds on public lands. So I'm going to collect from Cynthia's garden this fall, probably. But like your neighbors, the right of ways, the sides of the highway or roads. Up here on Sugarloaf, there's a lot of yellow sweet clover, and I've been spreading that for years. And that's not native either, but it's a really important plant for our honeybees and our native bees. So when you do collect, note what kind of habitat the plant's likes and try to mimic that in your own yard, or find a spot that it might like that's similar. So
Excellent. Thanks, Tracy. That's so great to know. Yeah, even collecting a bouquet of flowers is not okay on unless it's from your own garden, of course. So here's where you can find Colorado native plants. They're, as I said, sometimes hard to find, but there's some local plant sales and swaps. Try and get in with the Native Plant Society or the Rock Garden Society in Colorado. I know the Rock Garden Society is having a plant sale on May 22nd, I just heard about. So get into the world of native plants and find friends who are plant enthusiasts, and that's a great place to find these unusual things. And also, of course, mention it every time you're at every nursery, or just go to Harlequin's Gardens, and they have so many amazing natives and so much knowledge for you there. Don't be afraid of Latin names. Think of it as a learning a new language, learn a few new words, and that is really the only way to identify a plant and to put in a true native, which has all those benefits of the root systems and the coevolution with of specific bees and wasps and all the other beneficials that you want in your garden and that we want in our ecosystem. And we're part of a campaign you're about to hear about for rewilding Boulder. So it's really important to get a real native plant. And hopefully you can see this next slide, just some more resources, some amazing books that you should pick up, and other resources for you. Boulder Open Space and Mountain Parks has a great plant list that we can pop into the chat, or it's on our website. And just some amazing resources are out there. It's endless.
those 2 Doug Ptolemy books are so wonderful. I have learned a ton from them.
Great.
Yes, so Cynthia mentioned we're part of a campaign that we're super excited about. And along with the library, the BeeChicas are part of a team working with the city of Boulder to establish a pollinator habitat corridor through the heart of downtown Boulder. So it will stretch from the library, is it 8 or 10 blocks across the city, through neighborhoods and business districts. And it's just a very exciting campaign that we are launching this year with this Get Growing campaign. So Teresa BeeChica designed this beautiful logo for us. And we've partnered with all the local nurseries to highlight native plants the last 2 weeks of May. And so if you live near us, even Denver, Fort Collins, it's worth the drive to Boulder during this campaign to support the nurseries and find those special native plants that we've featured that caught your eye. And we have participating nurseries listed here and a couple of plant sales. And we hope you'll join us and just stay tuned about this project. It'll be a multi-year unfolding, and we're very excited to be involved with it.
Great. So we have some questions, Chicas. Is now a good time to start on some of the questions we've had come up?
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So Deborah, you had mentioned putting in your seed flats into the refrigerator to stratify.
Yeah.
We have a question. Can seeds go into the fridge in a damp paper towel, like in a plastic bag, to cold stratify?
Yes, they totally can. So I have, and truth be told, a second fridge. So it was easy for me to do one step and plant them and put the whole thing in the fridge, but it certainly saves room and is just as effective to do the damp paper towel in a sealed bag, because you need it to stay moist that entire time. Absolutely works. Yes.
Okay. And damp, not wet?
Yes, I would say
Okay.
damp, because you don't want the seeds to rot. So damp's better than wet.
Great. Thank you. Teresa, we have a question from another Teresa. Is the seed bed mixture just for starting seeds or for borders as well?
Well, the seed bed that you're putting in your native seeds, you could just do it for border too. You're going to be growing out the native seeds. You're going to be making sure that they are moist, right? You don't want the seeds to dry out, as Deborah had mentioned. I kind of like to tease the little natives away from one another and plant them out in where they're going to grow and make sure they're watered only if I can keep my eye on them, because they are going to send down those deep tap roots. And if you have them where they're going to grow, all the better, right? But that's why we have them in beds just until they get big enough to be able to plant out into an area that maybe we can't pay as much attention to. But you can also put them in borders. If they're going to be low natives, then you can put them in borders. Passiflower and different little campanulas and things like that would be beautiful in a border.
And the GM, the prairie smoke, is perfect in the front.
GM trilobum, beautiful. The prairie smoke, yes.
Great, thank you. Cynthia, Michelle is asking, do we get monarch butterflies to lay eggs on Asclepias here?
Yeah, we do. I've seen a few of them here. We're actually right on the edge of the monarch range. So the big migrations are in California and in the Midwest. But we do get a few stray monarchs, and I have had them. You can see their little beautiful little bright orange eggs underneath on the Asclepias leaves. I haven't really seen caterpillars that much here, but I see so many other butterflies like the swallowtails, and I also see the painted lady, which is a really common one for us. And I see painted ladies all over Joe Pyeweed, also on Asclepias nectarine. But yeah, we're sort of on the edge of monarchs, but give it a try. I've seen them in my garden. They love also liatris for nectarine. So they're all around my liatris every year.
Great, thank you. I can't remember who had, I think if it was Deborah or Teresa were talking about that sometimes your columbine can hybridize. And so we had a question, how important is it to plant the exact native? And are hybrids just as good for pollinators and beneficial insects?
That was Cynthia that was talking about them hybridizing. Do you want to speak to that, Cyn?
Sure, yeah. A native is a native, and a native is much better, the actual native. There are things that people call nativars, which are cultivated natives, and those are great pollinator plants, but you're not going to get the same thing that you get from the native plant as far as the ecosystem diversity that you're creating with the natives. So it's not like you're going to get no benefit. You're going to get a lot of benefit, but if you want the tippy top cream of the crop, best thing for eco gardeners, go for the true native.
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. And Teresa, you talked about amending the soil for the seed beds. Are there anything special you need to do if you want to plant natives in just your general yard?
Yes, you know what I do? I dig a large hole and I amend that hole with that same mixture of the topsoil, 50% with the squeegee, and some compost and a little bit of the wash sand. And then I just make up a bucket and I put some in the bottom and make sure that that plant ball is sitting up even or a little higher, fill it back in. I always put mycorrhizal fungi on my plant roots, which is a fungi that is symbiotic with plants. It helps them take up phosphorus and water. So I always use a root inoculant when I do my plants as well.
Great, thank you. Mm-hmm. And Tracy, you had talked about different places to look for native seeds to propagate. Did any other things come to mind?
Oh,
I know we were
for collecting native seeds, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yes. Cynthia's garden. I really don't. I mean, it's very hard to identify what plants I'm looking at. And I think the seed beds are a great idea, like starting from scratch, because then you know what you're putting in there and you can identify them. But yeah, not on public lands without a permit. And your neighbors' gardens that look really nice. And it doesn't have to be like, if you see a plant that you like, how like what it looks like, the blooms look like, maybe you can knock on a door and ask if you can have some seeds or
get to know those native plant communities.
Yes, there's also the Colorado Native Plant Society.
Yeah,
and there's dinner at Denver Botanical Gardens.
Yeah.
You know, talk to multiple plants people.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's such a growing movement, and there's so many people that are already passionate and interested. So
Yeah, and I expect to see more seed collecting walks. I know the Boulder Library is, you know, in the city's has initiated that in the past. So
And also in September, which is Pollinator Appreciation Month,
yeah,
we're gonna be doing tours of this new corridor. So look out for that. And the other thing I'll say is join the BeeChicas Buzz, because we've been talking about doing seed exchanges in the Buzz and coming over to my garden and collecting some of that Gaillardia aristata. So keep that in mind.
yeah, and maybe we
Nice.
should join the library seed exchange too, and bring some of Cynthia's native.
yes, the library's doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you do collect and from friends, make sure you label each jar, because you know, penstemons, they kind of all look the same.
And
You-
wouldn't you want to store them like in a paper bag, not a jar? But
I dry mine out completely and then I store them in a jar. But how about you, girls? Yeah.
We'll have to do another whole thing on seed collecting.
Sure.
When to collect seeds and how to clean them. That's a great other topic.
Yeah.
yeah,
And Jess Rainey's in charge of the seed library at the Boulder Public Library. So once the North Building opens, then the seed library will be available to the public again. And this is the first year where we'll have a much more formal way of people contributing your own seeds. So stay tuned for that and follow the Seed to Table programs at the library to get more information.
That is such a great program, Kathy. Thank you for doing that. Thanks to the library.
Kathy, maybe you can have a seed collecting workshop in the fall.
Yeah, Jess usually does do that with some master gardeners that come in and help with that. So we do a class on seed collecting as well as do a seed exchange, which has been great.
Yeah.
So we had a question from Michelle saying, I live in Superior. Is there a plan to make large swaths of pollinator native gardens throughout Boulder County?
Right
Oh,
now,
I think so.
the initiative right now is for City of Boulder, but I know Boulder County is interested, so I would make some noise around Superior that you want to do it, and hopefully it'll happen. Now's the time.
Well, and Superior has a very active Girl Scout troop that is building pollinator habitat. Remember, they came up around this a couple months ago, and they're raising money and creating pollinator gardens right in Superior. So you might connect with them and see if we can meet in the middle.
Nice. We had another. Oh, this has been wonderful. Sorry, I clicked on the wrong one.
Thanks, Michelle.
The question from Teresa is, where do you get inoculant? And
Well,
Teresa, you want to?
Sure. You can pick it up at several places. McGuckins is out. I got some at Harlequin Gardens, and it's called Mikos, I believe. MIKE is another one at Harlequins. I got some at Flower Bin, and you can also order it online. So
Right.
it's a root inoculant, mycorrhizal fungi.
And you can look at our previous talk about soils that Teresa did and make your own. It's really cool.
Yeah. So we've got compost. Was that the compost tea workshop?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think this concludes our question and answer period. Tracy, do you want to tell us about what the next workshop will be?
Oh, sure. This is next month, hopefully in June 9th. And in the morning when it's not too hot to look inside of a beehive, the four of us are going to look in the library beehives and do a complete inspection to show you all stages of a bee's life, from egg to larva to pupa to adult. And we might spot the queen. We'll probably see some workers or drones being born. And it's your chance to ask us questions. And we really want to invite kids to join us, because it's fun just to show you what we're seeing in the hive.
Great.
Online.
Yes, it will be online. And normally we can't invite people up onto the roof other than the BeeChicas. So this is an opportunity for you to get up close and personal with the hives.
Yeah.
And if it does rain, then we do have a rain date that we'll reschedule for July 14th at 9.
Yeah, we'll trim the camera so you can see the incredible view when we're up there tending to the bees, because it's pretty nice.
It is. The only thing you'll be missing is the smell of beeswax and millions of blossoms. But this is your closest chance really to
Yeah.
be a beekeeper and look in the hive with us.
Yes, you'll be able to catch the buzz while we're
You'll be able to hear it.
Oh, well, thank you so much. We've got Deborah Foy, Cynthia Scott, Teresa Beck, and Tracy Bell-Humer, who have been presenting on native plants for Colorado pollinators. Thank you for inviting us into your homes again and teaching us to reduce water usage and foster biodiversity for the benefits of healthier soil, native pollinators, and our environment. Thank you to Shannon in the background for engineering the broadcast, and to the Boulder Library Foundation, along with everyone who tuned in to ask and watch to watch and ask questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if you in our audience know others who'd enjoy this event, the session has been recorded and will be available to watch on the Boulder Public Library's Seed to Table and BeeChica YouTube playlists. Visit Boulder Public Library's Seed to Table website for upcoming programs. Thank you, Chicas.
Thank you.
Bye.
It's fun being with all of you today.
Yay.
No.
Happy gardening.
Happy planting.
Yes.